Hi, how are you? How is everything? So, uh, this is I'm called just Laon. I'm just going to give you a lecture about the chapters of a programming language. So we have been discussing about up to now. We just have discussed until chapter 3. So now, because of some conditions, we are going to give you a lecture using this method, which is you can find it in a YouTube channel or you can find it in any social media. You can be access you can access it in my Facebook also. So this is a chapter 4 topics, which is one of the main concepts of the programming language is a data type. A chapter 4 covers about the data types. Then in this data type there is an introduction part, the primitive data types, character string type, enumeration type, array types, and these are, and the final, which is a table type and a list type, union types, and a type checking that are the tasks that I will left to you, that you can go further and you can read a book to grasp some knowledge of these topics. Then I think let's go to the introduction part. I think you can define what data type mean. So I think you know what is a data type mean. So let's talk what is a data type. You can define what it means. Typically, we are interested not only on the actual values themselves, but what kind of operations, what can we do on these types. That means what operation we can apply to them, to the data types, because we are not only concerned or interested on the actual values of themselves, but we are what we can do with them, what type of operations we are going to use on them. This is the main concept of this one. Then what type of operation mean? There is some values on this one, which is addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and modulus, operations on the integer values. Then the data type should provide exact information on what these operations are and how they act. And different data types, we don't have to use any such. If we are going to use an integer type, we have to use some operations in the floating point. It is also the same thing. So concerning this topic, you can have another definition of a data type, which is define a collection of data objects and a set of predefined operations on these objects. Then you can define in general, data type is a set of values together with a set of operations on this value having a certain properties. For example, integer can be followed on this one. Then there is a boolean, which are and, or, x, or, not, such kind of values, which is not means which is a negation value. Sets that are union, intersection, a subsets of that kind of properties are available on the data types. Then an object represents an instance of a user-defined abstract data type. One design issue for all data types are what operations are provided for a variable of the type and how are they specified on this one. This is a main design issue of any programming language that takes place in data type. So what operations are provided for a variable of the type and how are they specified. This is a design issue of the data type concept. In addition to that, but in this one, I think I need you to be focused on this one. When we talk about the variables in here, they are an identifiers when they take a data type. When an imperative programming language, they take which is a data type. In this one, a variable means it is an identifier. But in some programming language, there are programming languages that doesn't take any data types. On this means a variable is not an identifier now. It is which is an attribute of a variable. So identifier could be this, is a part of, or it is attributes of a variable. It's not an identifier. That means so you have to be just serious on this one. If there are data types, yes, it is an identifier or a name, but in the programming language that doesn't have any types, it is wise to remember that the identifier is just one of the attributes of the variables. So in this kind of, so we will go on the primitive data types, which are this primitive data type means that cannot be defined by another type. So almost all programming language provide a set of primitive data type. Then the primitive data thus doesn't define in terms of other data types. These are not defined by another data types. Then some of the primitive data types reflect on the hardware of the computer architecture, so they can reflect it on the hardware. Others require a little hardware support for their implementations. Such examples on this one, which are on the little non-hardware supports for these implementations, are Python programming language is one of the examples of this one. They don't need any, just more hardware support. Then let's come to the primitive data types. There is a numerical type. In a numerical type category, which there is integer, floating point, complex, and a decimal. And in another category, which is Boolean type, character type. These are the main primitive data types of mostly the programming language. Most of the programming languages have such kind of types. So we will see each individual on this one, which is we will start with an integer value. I think you know what integer means. I think the most common primitive data type, which is an integer. Many compilers supports several sizes of an integer. For example, there is short, int, or long, byte. Such kind of these are a different size can be supported in any programming language. For example, Java assigned integer size are byte, short, int, and long. Most integer type are supported directly by the hardware. Then an example of integer type not supported directly by the hardware is not a longer integer type of in Python and F hash. So these are the which I have been talking about this one, which is not supported by their hardware implementation for their purpose of implementations. And there is also a signed and unsigned integer. Just there is signed, which is a target type, will have signed representations, and unsigned main. That means which is going to be the target will have unsigned representation of the given bits or the given numbers. Then when we say about the unsigned main, which are simply typed for integer value without any sign, but signed means there is a signs. So sign, which is the number of bits, the first bit or the leftmost bit, indicates the sign, whether it is a negative number or whether it is a positive number. It will indicate of that. Then let's come to, I think before we proceed to our floating point number, at this time there is also to represent a negative number of integers using a two complements ideas. So I think you know what the two complements means. So the negative number can be represented using of two complement. Then let's come to our floating point. This is a real model of which is real numbers, but the representations are only approximation of for many real values. So on this one, language for a scientific use support at least two floating pointers, which are a float and a double floating single precision as in is using the standard of IEEE, which is 32-bit, and a double precision will be a 64-bit precision. Then there is also one which is a long double extended precision, which takes 80 bits for the precision purpose. Then you can see the diagram on this one. I think you can remember this topic and the computational method, especially how to represent the floating point numbers using an IEEE standards with this concept. Then when we talk about the 32 bits, the first bit will be representing the sign, whether it is a negative or a positive number, and the next 8 bits will be for the exponential points. Then the last 23 will be for the fractional points. And the same thing when we talk about the 64 bits, there is just at the same one, which is the first leftmost bit will be for the sign bit, that whether to indicate whether it is negative or positive. The next 11 bits will be for the exponent, then the rest will be for the fractional points. These are the IEEE standard for the floating point number representations. So if you need a lot or more precision, you have to use which is a double precision values. Then let's come to the complex number. Some language support a complex type, which is Fortran and Python or C99 supports this kind of a complex number. This is used the complex value represented as order of pairs of floating pointers. So in this one, you can just refer the concepts of quadratic equations when you just need to find the real part and the imaginary parts of a given quadratic equation values. Then on this one, there is, for example, you can see on this one, there is 5 plus 3j. I think the 7 is a real part, and the 3, which concatenates with j, is called, which is an imaginary part. So you can, such kind of equations can be considered in Python and the Fortran in C99. And the next concept will be, which is a decimal value. This is for the business applications, which supports for the hardware. This hardware supports a decimal data types. In this, they store a fixed number of decimal digits. You can just remember this one because this will be useful. They store the decimal data types stores a fixed number of decimal digits with the decimal point at a fixed position in the values. So such kind of decimal data type are very essential in a COBOL, because COBOL, we know it is used for the applications of, for business applications program softwares. So this is very essential in COBOL, and C# also supports decimal data types. So I think we know the advantage. It is accuracy. If we are just having some decimal values but that they are fixed, we have an accuracy to represent a given number. But the disadvantage will be a limited range because it is a fixed and it is a wastage of memory also. So in this one, yeah, you can understand. By the way, these decimal numbers are represented in a binary code. In a binary code, decimal are represented as decimal values. Then the next and the most simplest thing is, which is a Boolean type, which is the simplest of all. I think they include two values, which is true or false values. So this range of value, two elements, one for true, one for false. So mostly 1 is for true, 0 is for false. And advantage will be what? Readability. The advantage of this Boolean type is just it will increase the readability of these programming languages. So these are the common algebraic operations of a Boolean operation, though there is a conjunction, disjunction, equivalence, exclusive OR, which is XOR, negation, which is NOT. So such kind of operations are handled using one of the primitive types of a Boolean. Then, as we know, C++ support native bool type with two values, false and true values. Then there is also a bitwise operation, which is AND, OR, XOR, and NOT. Just check and focus on the symbols, because we are going, when we talk about the logical operations also, there is an AND, but they are different. OR and NOT, these are the operations that takes place on the Boolean operation. And then you can check the programming which is written there, which is intimate something values about this one. So you can check what will be the output. You can write it using C or C++. I mean C++. You can say C out A, C out some B, something. So you can find any values on this one. Then it will be very clear to you. Then the next part is about the characters. When we talk about the characters, it's not going to store as a character in the computer, but it will be stored as a number, as a numeric digit or a numeric coding. These numeric codes are called an ASCII code of a given character. So this one is one. What does it mean about the ASCII? Is an American standard code for information interchange, which is used from 0 up to 127 numbers to code 128 different characters. So we have 128 characters, then these are represented using from 0 up to 127. So the starting point is 0, the last element will be 127 because n minus 1. Then and there are also which are used UTF-8, which is universal code transformation form, which is format 8-bit, is a character encoding capable of encoding all possible characters or code pointers in any code. And there is an alternative which is UCS2, which is a 60-bit coding. This mostly these are in Java, in JavaScript, Python, C# and F hash also supports such kind of Unicode. And there's also a 32-bit Unicode which is UCS4, supported by Fortran and starting from 2003. So these are the main concepts of this a character. And then a character string type. There is also a character string type, which is values are a sequence of characters. So it is also character string constants are used to label outputs, and the input and the output of all kind are data are in terms of strings. So there are a design issue on this regarding the string types, which are the most two, which are it's a primitive type. Is it a primitive type or just a special kind of array? Should a string have static or dynamic lengths? So these are the main design issues of a character string type. So when you just design a programming language, you have to check this type of design issues. You have to just raise such kind of question and you have to answer it. Is it a primitive type for that a given programming language or not? Or it is a special kind of array? Or whether the string have a static or a dynamic length, whether it will be changed or not, or fixed. Then character string type in a certain languages, you can refer on this one, which is C and C++. In C and C++, string is not primitive. Use char array and a library function that provides an operation. In Snowball, which is a string manipulation language, then it is a primitive, many operations including elaborate pattern matching. Then in a Fortran and Python, primitive type with an assignment and several operations. Then there is a Java, it is a primitive via the string class, so values are constant strings. String buffer class, some such examples. Then in Java, in Ruby and PHP also, it provides built-in pattern matching using irregular expressions on this one. So if you need more on this one, you can refer. Then there is which is called enumeration type. So you can refer some which is in enumeration values, which is all possible values which are named constant are provided in the definition. Because this part, the enumeration type is a user-defined ordinal types, which is an ordinal type mean is one of in which the range of possible values can be easily associated with a set of positive integers. In Java, for example, the primitive ordinal types are integer, char, and boolean values. There are two user-defined ordinal types that have been supported by programming language: enumeration and subrange. So enumeration type you can just as which is written on the slide. An enumeration type is one in which all of the possible values which are named constant. For example, these are named constant with a Monday, Tuesday, something like this, are provided or enumerated in the definition. Then enumeration type provide a way of defining and grouping collection of named constants which are called enumeration constant. When this collection of a named constant are together, if they are just grouped in the same one, then these are called enumeration constants. So in C#, this is an example which is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which is up to Sunday. So the enumeration constants are typically implicitly assigned the integer values from 0 up to that one, up to the last one, but can be explicitly assigned any integer literal in the type definition. Then there is a design issue on this one also. Is an enumeration constant allowed to appear in more than one type definition? Is it? And if so, how? The type of the occurrence of the constant in the program. Check it. Are enumeration values coursed to integer? Are they changed to or converted to integer? or any other type coursed to an enumeration type, or from another types of data type, is it coursed to an enumeration type, or whether it is converted to an enumeration type. So this kind of design issue must be answered when you design any programming language design. Then we have to evaluation of an enumerated type, which is what is the use of enumeration type. It is advantages to aid readability. So no need to code a color as a number. For example, in C++, enum color, red, blue, green, yellow, black, then color my color. There is a new object created, then blue, your color will be red. So you can assign any, from the named constants collection, you can assign any object with that values. So also that the expression my color plus or my color is equal to 4 are illegal in C++. In C++ only. Then let's come to the good concept, which are array. I think you are more familiar with the concepts of array here. I think it is clear what arrays mean. I think an array is an homogeneous aggregation of data elements in which an individual element is identified by its position, which is index in the aggregate relative to the first element, isn't it? So when we say about the homogeneous aggregation, with the similar data types of elements are combined together, that is what array mean. Then if we say that, what are the design issues on the array? Then firstly, what type are legal for subscript? When we say about subscript, it is the index, whether or the expression of that. Are subscript expression in element referencing range checked? Whether the range is checked. Sometimes the array can say out of bound or out of range. Such kind of value, is it checked, that kind of boundary ranges? When are subscript range are bound? When does array allocation takes place? Or are rigid rectangular multidimensional array are allowed, or both rigid or rectangular multidimensional? Can array be initialized when they have their storage allocated? What kind of slice are allowed, if any? These are the design issues, and this must be answered if you are going to design any programming language. So sorry, then some examples are this, which is using namespace, then int main, int a. Thus numbers are initialized with a memory location of 3. So cout, when you say cout a0 a2 up to a2, then you know what will be the output of this result. This is a simple array initialization. Then let's come to array indexing. Indexing or subscripting is mapping from indices elements. That is the meaning of which is indexing. And this one, there is an initial or declaration of an array using this one, array name, then index value, list, then an element. If all of the subject in a reference are constant, the selector is going to be what? Static. If all of the subject is referenced are constant, so the selector is static. Otherwise, it's going to be what? A dynamic. Then the index syntax are the Fortran in ADA use parentheses. And this one they use this one, which is a parenthesis, but in most of other programming language uses brackets for the array. Array sometimes can be called, which is a finite mapping. So as you can see on this one. And the next topic is array index subscript types. What kind of types are we going to use on the array subscription or on the index? I think mostly we just use an integer values, isn't it? So we cannot say on the integer indexing values, which is 1.4 or 1.3, some values. And up to some programs, we were just not using any negative integers also. But in Python, we can use a negative number to indicate the last element. Then in Fortran C-based language, the integers only. Ada integers or enumeration include boolean and char, you can use on this one. In Java, there is only integer types index range checking. Let's come on this one. In C and C++, per and Fortran do not specify range checking, but in Java, in ML and C# specify range checking values. As I have been told you, range checking means, which is when we initialize an array, if we put some value on the bracket, on the square bracket, if we say just 5, that means the memory will be allocated to 5 datas or elements. That means we start from 0 up to n-1. The element -1 means up to 4. So we have 5 elements. So the memory will be allocated to 5 elements, that's starting from the 0 indexing to 4 indexing. The final element will be 4. So on this one, whether the range is checked or not, it will specify. Java and C#, they specify this kind of range checking. So the lower bound will be 0, the higher bound will be what? n-1, or the element -1. Then in Python also, it will indicate the last element using a -1. If it is on the square bracket is a -1, that means it's the last element of the given array. Okay, on this one also there is a subscript binding and array categories, which is there are 4 categories of an array based on the binding subscript range, based on the binding of subscript range, the binding to storage, and from where the storage is allocated. This are we will see in each of this one, which is firstly there is a static subscription. Those the subscripts are mostly statically bound, and storage allocation is static before runtime. So if we just the range is static and the storage allocation is static, that means before the runtime, if this kind of concept is arranged before the runtime, it's going to be a static binding or static. Example, an array declaration in C or C++ that includes static modifier are called, which is static int array. This means the int and the array name is array ARR is static, and the size is also allocated for 100 elements. This is static. This will not be changed during the runtime. Then what will be the advantage? It will be efficiency, because it is easy. We just put 100 memory allocation for the 100 values for the elements. So this will be efficiency, because there is no any dynamic allocation. When there is a dynamic allocation, it means there is an overhead. So that will be a disadvantage. Then the disadvantage will be storages are fixed here for the entire execution time of the program. So we cannot change any space, or if it is already, if we are going to remove that array also, it is not, because it is fixed in the memory allocation. It is fixed for the 100 values, so it will be 100 values. For example, this is int main, which is static int array. We are just allocating the memory for 3 arrays, for 3 elements, so starting from 0 up to 2. So this is static kind of binding array categorization. Then the second part is which is a fixed stack dynamic. And this also subscript ranges are statically bound, but the allocation is done in a declaration elaboration time during the execution. So the allocation of the memory will be during the execution, and the subscript range are statically bound. And for example, there is an example which is array declare inside C. Functions that don't include static specifier are fixed static dynamic. On the previous one, it was static int array with a memory location of 100 elements. Then in this one, if you can see this one, void f1, then int array with 3, there is no any static keyword here, int array with 3, and we just initialize 3 values to that memory allocation. So as the execution time will be assigned, the allocation of the memory will take place as the execution. So this is a fixed stack dynamic. Its advantage is space efficiency, because we are not fixing any memory allocation, because it will be allocated during the execution time. Then the disadvantage will be allocation and deallocation time. So it will take time for the allocation, because we are just allocating this values and the execution time, so it will take time, and for the deallocation also it will take time. So this will be the disadvantage of this one. Then the next one will be fixed heap dynamic. That the previous one was just fixed stack dynamic, but this one is fixed heap dynamic. So similar to a fixed stack dynamic, on what subscript ranges are fixed, the subscript range are fixed, and storage binding is also fixed on this one. Then you can see, which is you can see the example which is written there. When in C library functions there is a malloc, which is memory allocation for allocation purpose, and for deallocation also we have to use the free keyword, which is and also in C++ there is a new and a delete operators to use in order to allocate or deallocate the memory allocations. Then in Java, just non-generic array example, array list. Yeah, if you say just array list, it will create a memory allocate for this also. Then you can see the example, which is int a, int this one, the malloc, that means just memory allocation for the 100 values, size of int. Then in C++, in it, a new, this is a keyword which is new, used for creation of a memory allocation for the 100 times. Then to free up, there is a free for the C, and for C++ also delete a. And the advantage and disadvantage also, the advantage, it will be a flexibility, array size always fits the problem. Then the disadvantage, allocation time from the heap is longer than allocation time from the stack. So because we are taking the allocation from the heap here, but on the previous it was from the stack, so the allocation time from the heap will be longer than the time from the stack. Then I think this is the last categorization of the array binding categorization. This is a heap dynamic, which is binding of subscript range and storage allocations are completely dynamic here and can change any number of times. So this will be object of C#, for example, list class per in Java subscript array through the push and unshift methods. There is a push keyword also, so you can push elements to a memory allocate dynamically. Then Python and Ruby also use array also. This is example in size 3, just int heap dynamic array, new in size, delete a heap dynamic array. So the advantage of this one will be what? It is clearly known, it's flexibility, array grow or shrink during program execution. If we need to add another size, we can add. If we need to deallocate, so we can going to shrink its memories. So this will be a very good advantage on flexibility. Then how we are going to initialize an array. So these are some language allow initialization at the time of the storage allocation. So in C, in C++, in Java, in C#, examples int list, you can see like this one, character string also this can be. So these are such examples of how to initialize an array element using different types of programming languages. Then we have been talking about the homogeneous array, but now we are going to talk about the heterogeneous arrays. So I think it is clear to know what heterogeneous mean. In this one, I think heterogeneous array is one in which the elements need not be of the same type. On the homogeneous, all the elements was the same type, but in heterogeneous, they may not be the same type, the elements of the array. So these are supported by Perl, JavaScript, Python, and Ruby programming language, and so on. JavaScript example, for example, this is a var miscellaneous, so any variable name, which is hello. This is a string type. This is a double type, and this is a boolean type. These three different types of elements are with the same variable name. In a per, you have to use this a conventional symbol. Then there is also, this is a square bracket, but this is a bracket, so hello, this, and also. So you can have different types of elements with the different types of elements, data types. In Ruby also, in Python is also such. So this is a heterogeneous array mean. And what types of array operations takes place on this one? Array operations, most common array operations are what? Assignment, catenation, comparison, and slices. So I think NAPL provides the most powerful array processing operation for vector and matrix as well as unary operations such as an asterisk symbol. For example, to reverse Coleman elements Python array are called lists. This is provide assignment, but they are only reference change. Python also support array catenation using this plus symbol. Catenation means just linking of different types of elements if you need to link them. And element membership operations, which is in Ruby also provides array catenation. Elements are reference to object in this in a Perl. In Fortran provide elements operations because they are between pairs of array elements. For example, plus operator between two array result in array of the sum of the elements of an array, isn't it? The pairs of elements of the two arrays. So these are the operations of array. Slices, we will be back on that. It's always have own slide on this one. Then there is also whether it is a rectangular or a jagged array. By the way, these are the concepts of the design issue. You have to answer on the design issues. These are the design issues questions. Then what does it mean a rectangular array? Is when there is a row and the column elements have the same size. That means array in which all of the rows have the same number of elements and all columns have the same number of elements. But whereas in a jagged matrix has row with varying number of columns, or this is the difference between a rectangular array and a jagged matrix. That means jagged is having a different size elements a row or varying element numbers of in the column. But in a rectangular array, the elements of row are the same with the number of the columns, the numbers of element on the column. So in C and C++ in Java supports jagged array. And also Fortran and C# support rectangular array. In this one, C# have a double advantage on this one because it supports the jagged array and it supports also a rectangular array that have the same number of elements in a row and with the same number of elements in a column. And also that means which is a varying number of elements in a row with a column. Then C# also support jagged array. So this is the example, so you can check because it how we have the first row has 3 columns and the second row has 4 columns. This one, so different types of numbers of element on the row and the column. That means that is a jagged array. Then slices. This concept will be very clear to you when you just, if you can remember a MATLAB or programming language. We have also MATLAB. This one was slicing. Slice is some substructure of an array, nothing more than a referencing mechanism. Slices are only useful in a language that have array operations. For example, there is a vector declared, which is these are the elements are declared or initialized in this vector variable. Then there is also another variable declared with such initialization values. Here vector 3 a column 6. This means start from the index 3 of that number up to 6. We are slicing. That's we are just specifying what values we need. What values we need from this initialization of the array. So that means you can see the output here. 8, 10, 12. That means 0, 1, 2, 3. It starts from the index 3. That means 8 up to 6, which is 3, 4, 5, isn't it? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it starts from 0. So we'll print out these values. So in the second variable math, which is 1, means just the first initialize 0. This is as a whole is 0. This is 1. This is 2. So we will specify this element also. So you can go and see what it means others. So because there is an output which is listed on the right side of that one, so you can check what is operating on this one. So there is also a Ruby example in one, so you can see. Then let's come to associative arrays. So an associative array is an ordered collection of data elements that are indexed by an equal number of value called keys, not by indexing. So these indexes are so user-defined keys must be stored, then built-in in Perl, in Python, in Ruby, and Lua. In Lua they are supported using tables form. So this is an ordered collection of array elements, data elements that are indexed by equal number of values of key. So when you see the examples, it will be very clear to you. For example, in Perl, the arrays are like this one. In Perl, they are also known as hashes. This double arrow operator connects a key, which is always a string. That it means sensitive. This is, it can be a name or identifier something on the left with a value corresponding to it, which is to the right side. That means this is the key, and this is a double arrow, and this is the value, which is corresponding to the left values, which is this one. This is a variable, which is a salary. But in Perl, every hash variable name must begin with a percent sign. This is the salary, is a hash value. Then it is a hash variable. So the hash variable must start with this, a percent symbol. Then this is the key, and this is an operator, and this is the value to that key. So there are different types of here in this, because it's an order collection of elements. So this is the concept. Then if we need to assign a new value to the existing key, we have to use this one, salary, which is, we have to use the $sign salaries, Perry, because Perry is here. So we need to substitute this value, the right side of it's Perly. So this value must be changed to this one. So we need, so the $sign salary in a double quote in a curly brace, inside the curly brace, then this value will be assigned. So this will be substituted by this one. And also if we need to remove that, if we need to remove any elements on that collection, we have to use the delete, then the $sign salary Gary. So this will be deleted. Then if we need to delete the entire array elements, we can assign an empty literal to it. That's, this is at symbol. This is the conventional symbols, by the way. This $sign, this percent, these are conventional symbols. Then salary with an empty sign. So this is an empty, so it will be delete all the elements that are which corresponding to a salary variable. So these are all, this will be deleted on this one. And another example is in a Ruby. In Ruby they are also called, which is hashes. In this there is a double arrow operator, connect a key on the left with a value corresponding to it to the right. So for example, on this one we are not going to use any percent symbol. We just say the variable itself, which is a salary, which is a hash variable. Then there is a Gary will be assigned this value, Perry will be assigned this value. If we need to assign this value also, to assign to the element of this with a key, Perry would appear as follows: salary, Perry, and this one. But you can check in the previous one, which is in Perly, we were just using the $symbol, isn't it, in order to replace the given value. So in this one we are not going to use any symbols on this one. And if we need to delete, so also, which is salary dot operator, we just use in this one a dot operator to end the delete keyword Gary, then this will be deleted, this one. And if we just to delete the entire elements of the array, the hash, we can assign, which is an empty literal to it. So salary, you can this, or salary dot clear, or you can use, I think this is a better thing, salary dot clear, that it will clear all the elements that are related to the salary hash. And also, yes, we can see in the Python, in a Python, the associate array are called dictionaries. And the Perl and Ruby, they were just called hashes, but in this one, dictionaries. And in this, each key is separated from the value by a colon. That means Gary key and its value are separated by using the colon. The items are separated by a comma because these are one key and this is the second and this is third and this is fourth, and these are four elements are categorized in this one dictionary, which is called a salary name. Then these are the columns that differentiate between the key and the value. But on that one, there's on the per and the Ruby, we were just using a double arrow to indicate this one. So comma are separated, the items are separated using a comma also. So if we need to assign a value, which is a given value, the Perly will be assigned the new value of this one. So we have to use salary Perry is this one. So I think this is much more similar to Ruby, but not completely similar. An element can be removed from the hash with the del operator, but on the Ruby it was dot delete. In this one, del salary Gary, this will be deleted. Then if we need to entirely empty that salary dictionary, if we need to clear all these elements, we can use salary empty symbol and salaries dot clear, which is more similar to Ruby programming language also. Then there is another topic which is a record type also. In this one, just it is an aggregate of data element in which the individual elements are identified by names and accessed through the offset from the beginning of the structure. So these are identified, individual elements are identified using what? By names and accessed through their offset from the beginning of the structure. Then common operation on record type include declaring, referencing fields within record also. Then a record is possibly a heterogeneous aggregate because it is a record. Record, when we just you can give a meaning of what the meaning of record is. Record is a collection of many things. So it is an heterogeneous array on data elements in which the individual elements are identified using names. In C and C++, initial records are supported with structured data type, struct. In Python and Ruby, records can be implemented as hashes, which themselves can be elements of an array. So what is the difference between the array and the record? In a record, element or field are referenced by identifier, that means names, isn't it? And record may include also unions, but in array they don't. And in array, elements are referenced, identified by what? By index. Then what are the design issues on this one also? What is the syntactic form of reference to a field or elliptic reference are allowed? This must be answered when you design on this one. Then the evaluation, the comparison of to array will be also this one. Record used when collection of data value is heterogeneous, but array is homogeneous. Array are used when all the data value have the same type and are processed in the same way, isn't it? So this is a homogeneous way. Access to array element is much slower than array. Just accessing array elements is much slower than to record fields because subscript are dynamic. So if it is dynamic, it will be very slow because it is there is a time overhead. Then field name are static which is in a record. Then I think this is the next point, which is the pointers and reference types. In this one, a pointer type variable has a range of values that consists of a memory address, not the value. Pointer refers to the address, not the value. And there is also a special type which is nil if we just make a mistake on addressing of that values. So if the values are not, if the address is not found on that, that's the pointer points to. So you can say it nil operator also. So it provides the power of indirect addressing. When we talk about the pointer, it is an indirect addressing. Mostly in assembly language, there is most of the time is used in the assembly language, which is an indirect addressing. Pointer points to the address. After that, that address have another value inside of that is memory allocation. So that is a value which are going to point. So provides, that means, by the way, there is a direct, if we just say about the direct addressing, it will go to the direct value of the address. Then provides a way to manage a dynamic memory. A pointer can be used to access location in the area where storage is dynamically created, usually called heap, which are in heap, the memory are dynamically created. What are the design issues of the pointers also? What are the scope and lifetime of a pointer variable? What is the lifetime of a heap dynamic variable? Are pointers restricted to the type of or such? Should the language support pointer type, reference type, or both? So this must be answered. Then what are the operations of pointer? There are two fundamental operations, which are assignment and dereferencing. Assignment means just assigning the value of that the pointer points to the address. Then assignment is to set a pointer variable value to some useful address. For example, here is it. Pointer, that, for example, if pointer is pointer variable with the value 7080 and the cell whose address it has the value of 200, the pointer points this address to 7080. This means it points to this address. Then in this address there is another value, so the element we need is this one, the value. So this is the meaning of assignment operation. So variable to some useful addresses. Dereferencing is the value stored as a location represented by the pointer's value. Value stored as a location represented, this is a pointer points to this one, and inside that address there is a value. This is a dereferencing mean here. So dereferencing can be explicit or implicitly. C++ uses an explicit expression via this an asterisk operation. Then J will point the pointer set J to the value located at pointer. So J will be located to the pointer points to the address. Then this is an example, so you can check what it means here with a flow diagram on this one. Then what are the problems with the pointers also? There is a dangling problem. It's very dangerous on this one. What does it mean? What is a dangling problem mean? When a pointer points to the allocated location, when the variable has been deallocated, so our pointer is pointing to the wrong address. That means in that address that the memory location is deallocated. So a new heap dynamic variable is created and pointer p is set to point to it. A pointer p2 is assigned p1's value, but the heap dynamic variable pointed to p1 is explicitly deallocated because p2 is assigned by p1 value. So p2 is not going to be located on this previous value because it is assigned to another value explicitly. So the heap variable pointed to by p1 is explicitly deallocated, possibly setting p1 to what? To nil. But p2 is not changed by the operation, isn't it? So p2 is now a dangling pointer because it is referring to deallocated address. The other is lost heap dynamic variables. And this one, which is we are referring the address that are not accessible for the program. So these are called garbage values. An allocation heap dynamic variable that is no longer accessible to the user program, often called which is a garbage. Pointer p1 is set to point to a newly created heap dynamic variables. Pointer p1 is later set to point to another newly created heap dynamic also. These are garbage values because we are pointing to the address which is no longer accessible by the program or to the user. Then I think further you can go what are the solutions to the pointer problem. There is also a Tungsten method to overcome the dangling problems on the pointer, so you can go further on this one. What is the reference type, tuple types and list type and unit types, and type checking also. So you can go further for such this type of concepts. So refer the book, you will have a good knowledge on this one. So also, so for today, I think this will be enough. Thank you for the time you gave for me. So thank you. Bye.